Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane met with the media at the 2024 NFL Scouting Combine, offering some general updates and some perspective on the coaching staff. We got a lot to cover here today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Well, folks, welcome in the Buffalo Bills brass. Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane met with the media at the 2024 NFL Scouting Combine. And today I want to focus in on reflecting on their comments. Sean McDermott met with the media for over a half an hour. I think Brandon Beane was probably 20, 30 minutes. And so we're going to talk about the most important things that they discussed, and I'll offer my insight along the way. Now, one transaction that went down for the Buffalo Bills was the restructuring of Connor McGovern, the Bills starting left guard. The Bills converted $4.675 million of McGovern's 2024 base salary into signing bonus. They added 2 void years to the contract and cleared $3.74 million of cap space this season. And so, you know, the Bills have several more moves just like this that they'll have to make to become cap compliant, but this was the first one that happened. Now, I do want to call out the void years that were added to the end of this contract. And what those are years where this player is going to count against your salary cap space, but they won't be on the team. So technically, McGovern is signed through 2028, but his contract voids after 2025. And this is just the type of cap gymnastics that the Bills have to do right now. And so to make this very practical, Connor McGovern is not under contract to play for the Buffalo Bills after 2025, but in 2026, he's going to count $4.8 million against the cap. In 2027, he's going to count $1.9 million. And in 2028, he's going to count $935,000. And that's regardless if they bring him back or not. So that's the reality of void years and the reality of the salary cap. So again, if somebody tells you the NFL salary cap isn't real, well, they just don't know what the heck they're talking about. And this is a very practical example as to the reality of the whole situation. And the Bills are going to make a lot more moves just like this. They did this with Leonard Floyd. They had several void years on the end of his deal to make that work. And I think you'll see this happen quite a bit here with the Buffalo Bills and their current cap position. So that is something I wanted to acknowledge here at the beginning of this conversation. And now we can get into the comments made by Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. And most of these comments are actually going to come from Sean McDermott's press conference. I obviously listened to both of them, but the Brandon Beane conference was kind of scattershot. A lot of questions that don't have any relevancy, like the scouting process for Josh Allen. How many times has that story been told? They asked some questions about Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. So there wasn't as much to glean from Beane as there was McDermott, but I'll try to get to you what I thought was the most interesting and notable things that both of those men said during their podium sessions. So Brandon Beane, we will start with the comment that he made on Stefon Diggs. He was asked about Stefon Diggs, and Brandon Beane said, yeah, I expect him to be here. Nothing has changed from that standpoint, which was encouraging because that was it. Like, there was no other questions about Diggs. McDermott didn't talk about Diggs. So much of the conversation centered around Stefon Diggs is just manufactured crap. And I think big media knows that poking the Stefon Diggs bear and talking about it drives engagement. And unfortunately, fans just continue to fall for it. And it's this big nothing burger. Like Stefon Diggs is under contract to play for the Buffalo Bills for the next 4 seasons. There's no opportunity to get out of the deal. Expect him to be back and to get 150 targets and be very productive next season. Like I'm done having these speculatory conversations about Stefon Diggs. I'm done with it. It's not interesting. It's not rooted in anything interesting. So until there's something interesting to discuss, don't expect us to talk about that, the nature of the Stefon Diggs and all that on this podcast. Brandon Beane on the salary cap. He was asked about, of course, it being $255 million, which was much higher than anticipated. Beane said that he was conservatively prepping for somewhere in the 240s, and he said he was smiling when he found out that it was 255. And every source that you hear, it doesn't feel like anybody was expecting 255. I think maybe some people were hopeful for 250, but from all the insiders and all the different comments that have come out from general managers, seems like most people were anticipating mid 240s. And so it's been a great piece of news for, of course, every team, but especially the Bills, who have a long way to go in terms of becoming cap compliant. Brandon Beane was asked about Gabe Davis, AJ Epenesa, the other expiring contracts on the team. And particularly for Gabe and AJ, he said, we love to draft, develop, and re-sign. They've developed well and earned the right to go to free agency. And then he talked about bringing back other unrestricted free agents. And he said, look, it's not really about how much cap we can create. There's not a single pending free agent that he looks at and says that he doesn't want them back. He said they're just going to try to figure out how to create cap space to possibly retain those players without piling up too much dead money down the road, which is what they've already done with the Connor McGovern restructure and will likely happen with a few other players as well. Sean McDermott was asked about Micah Hyde, and of course, Micah Hyde, an expiring contract. So he'll either retire or sign with the Bills or sign with some other team. But Sean McDermott indicated that Micah Hyde has not given him any indication yet on his future. And not that I would expect, like, even if he did, is Sean McDermott really going to answer in a combine press conference and announce the retirement of Micah Hyde? Like, that's not going to happen. But he at least communicated that there's been nothing communicated to him yet on the future for Micah Hyde. Sean McDermott was asked about Eric Washington leaving, and in particular, the role of assistant head coach, which he had this past season. Leslie Frazier, the assistant head coach, prior to Eric Washington. Sean McDermott said there's no decision yet on that. He's open to somebody becoming the assistant head coach at some point, but they're not at a point yet where they're naming anybody assistant head coach. Last piece of general updates here before we get into some interesting comments that Sean McDermott made about Bobby Babich, play calling, special teams, those types of things, was just a general update on Trey White and Matt Milano and their rehab. McDermott and Beane were both asked about these players and said they're both doing well. They're both working hard. There seemed to be an indication from both Beane and McDermott that they're actually in Buffalo and rehabbing, at least some of the time. And McDermott even said when he's in the facility, he sees those guys every single day. So a couple of players coming off of big injuries that we're all hopeful can come back and make an impact. And it's good to know that they're doing everything that they can to get themselves ready to play. All right, folks, stick with me here in just a moment. We're going to talk about Bobby Babich, defensive play calling, and some other nuggets from these combine press conferences of Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. Get buckets on your first bet with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. They've also got footballs, futures, hockey, whatever sport you're into. FanDuel is going to have some fun action for you to check out. And this deal that they have right now, new customers getting $150 in bonus bets with a winning $5 bet, is outstanding. So check it out. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Have you ever considered what you would do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you exercise, read, spend time with family or friends, maybe catch up on some sleep? A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had some more time. Well, the question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find out what matters most to you so you can do more of it. Therapy is helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. Therapy is not just for people who have experienced major trauma. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, be sure to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire. That'll get you matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. All right, folks, Sean McDermott was asked about Bobby Babich being the defensive coordinator, and in particular, who's going to call the plays. And I know this is a topic that we've speculated over, and we don't have an answer. This is what Sean McDermott said. He said, we'll make that decision when we need to. And obviously, they haven't made that decision. I think maybe the most interesting thing about that answer is that he didn't say, yes, our plan is to have Bobby Babich call the plays. With him answering it the way that he did, it opened up the possibility for it to be Sean McDermott. It opened the possibility for it to be Bobby Babich, potentially a combination of both. So we don't yet have that clarity, and I can respect the answer. It's like, look, it's February. We don't have to decide this right now. Let's see how this all takes off. Let's get into the offseason program, and when that decision has to be made, we'll make that decision. Sean McDermott, when talking about Bobby Babich and becoming the defensive coordinator, Sean McDermott said he's had the chance to be around Bobby for a number of years. Said Bobby's always been a highly energetic young coach. He comes from a coaching family and a coaching background. I've just always been impressed with Bobby's curiosity about the game, offensively and defensively as well. And then he was asked a follow-up question. I say he, I mean Sean McDermott. He was asked a follow-up question about the play calling and, you know, what it takes to be a play caller, defensive play caller. And I thought his answer was interesting here. He said, you have to be able to think on your feet. You don't have the ability to sit at home and rewind the play and then make a call. So you've got to be able to quickly process down and distance, personnel, situation of the game, what has happened before that play, what could happen after that play, what you're setting up. He said there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of good position coaches that have not been able to become great coordinators because of the inability to process all that information at a moment's notice. He said, I think Bobby's got it, but it remains to be seen. It's a projection on my part. I love that Bobby has the ability to see the game in 2 and 3 dimensions. He's coached 2 of the 3 levels of the defense. The only one he hasn't coached is the defensive line. But when you work with the linebackers, you're also working with the defensive line. And so I thought it was kind of a well-stated answer by Sean McDermott. He doesn't always give you a ton when he's asked questions, but I thought he did in this instance, and talked about the characteristics of what's necessary to be a good play caller. And now that he's put that criteria out there, now he's opened himself up to the questions about, well, if Bobby Babich doesn't call the plays, well, what was it, Sean? Can he not think on his feet? Can he not put all this together? Right? He's told you his criteria. And I think that was just kind of interesting and something for us to monitor moving forward. But I am hopeful that Bobby Babich is the defensive play caller. I think it would say a lot about his capacity and the way that Sean McDermott perceives him. And obviously that's a big responsibility, and one that Sean McDermott has done well throughout his career. And for him to look at Bobby Babich and acknowledge if he does take on the defensive play calling, that says a lot about Bobby, that Sean would relinquish that to him and have the confidence and trust in him to do that. And so obviously it'll be a big storyline throughout the course of the offseason up until a decision is made. And I think the interesting part right now is that we know kind of the criteria and what Sean McDermott is thinking. I also find it interesting that Sean McDermott said, look, it's a projection on my part. And I think that puts some ownership in Sean. Of course, I mean, he's making these decisions, but, you know, even acknowledging, look, yeah, a lot of this is projection based. This is a first-time coordinator. He also did say things like, look, we're joined at the hip. I'm going to be here to help him. That's my job. So it's going to be, I think no matter what, it's going to be a collaborative effort between McDermott and Babich. It's just going to be interesting to monitor how much Babich continues to take off of Sean McDermott now that he's got the official title of defensive coordinator. Sean McDermott was asked about the new defensive coaching staff, and I did an entire episode last week with Anthony Prohaska of Cover One about the new defensive coaching staff, and I think there's a lot to get into here. This is what Sean McDermott said. He said there's a lot of new ideas. We're looking at what we've done, and it's been good, but we ask ourselves the question, can it be better? And talked about those new coaches coming in, a lot of them from the college ranks, and how that puts them in a unique position to offer some different perspective. Obviously, there's some differences in the way the game is played at the college level compared to the NFL, and a lot of the trends that we see happen in the NFL start in college, and a lot of these coaches that are coming over from college have already been challenged in those ways, and I think they can add some perspective. And Sean McDermott even said, look, they can bring another dimension. And Sean McDermott also talked about, look, continuity is a good thing, but also having new ideas is a good thing, and people that can come in and really assess what's been going down and come up with or offer new insight on, how you can improve. And so it was cool to see Sean McDermott seemingly eager to want that feedback and embracing it as well. And a big storyline for the Bills in 2024 is this overhaul defensive coaching staff. I mean, literally the whole thing's been flipped upside down. Literally. Bobby Babich, the defensive coordinator, Eric Washington to Chicago, John Butler mutually parted ways with the team. Al Holcomb goes to linebackers coach. Marcus West goes to defensive line coach from assistant D-line coach. You have outside hires for cornerbacks coach, outside hire for nickels coach, outside hire for assistant defensive line coach and defensive quality control coach. Joe Dana, the Bills safeties coach, is the only defensive coach returning to the same role in 2024. It's a completely flipped upside down defensive coaching staff. And to me, my response to that is good. Like, this defense has been good, but it has been terrible in these playoff elimination games. And the personnel has in some ways been similar, but it's been the same core of coaches, and they're good coaches. But I like the idea of entering those moments moving forward with different voices. Even if you did say goodbye to some veteran, established, high acumen coaches in a Leslie Frazier, in a John Butler, in an Eric Washington. But those guys weren't getting you over the hump. And I'm sure a lot of you people are saying, Joe, it's Sean McDermott. He can't do it, right? Like, I get it. I understand how a lot of people think. But at least Sean McDermott has put new people in new positions to get new ideas to hopefully not get the same result. Literally, Joe Dana, the only defensive coach from 2023 returning to the same role in 2024. 4 brand new outside hires on this coaching staff. And 3 other dudes in much bigger roles than they were in the past. Sean McDermott was asked about the inconsistencies on special teams. I think this is a great question. I know that a lot of people were hoping that Matthew Smiley was fired, right? A lot of people wanted that to happen because the special teams weren't as good in his second year as they were in his first year. This is what Sean McDermott said. He said, you can certainly look at things and say we can do better from this past season. Coach Smiley and I have talked about that. You go back to this year and his first season where the numbers were better, and through 2 seasons, he's had one that I thought was pretty good and one where I thought it could have been better. Coach Smiley's committed to getting us back to where we were. We've got to build it up to help him and make sure that he has what he needs to be successful. And when asked specifically where that should start, like where he's looking for the improvements, Sean McDermott said, we have to get the negative splash plays against us out of our game. And he mentioned it started in the first game of the season where the Bills lost in overtime to the Jets on a punt return for a touchdown. He said that's a good place to start, but obviously we know it extends further, right? It wasn't just punt coverage. It was the field goal unit. Tyler Bass regression this past season. You didn't really have much in the way of explosive returns for yourself. I thought the decision-making was good at punt return. I thought Deontay Hardy did a pretty good job, but your kick return game was pretty underwhelming. And then, it wasn't just that punt return. You gave up a kick return for a touchdown to Jalen Reagor against the Patriots. Like you caused yourself some problems with special teams. And even in that playoff elimination game against Kansas City, you had some special teams issues there as well. So, let's all hope that this special teams unit looks a lot more like it did in 2022 compared to 2023 when Smiley had a great first season on the job. All right, we're going to talk offense in a very, very clear theme from both Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane when it comes to explosive play. So we're going to get into that here in just a second. So be sure, stick with me. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, folks, let's get into the offensive side of this discussion. Sean McDermott asked about Joe Brady, of course, going from interim OC to the permanent offensive coordinator. McDermott said, "You saw some of what Joe wants to do, but not all of it." Mentioned that the Bills were able to add an offensive staff member in Ronald Curry, who Joe Brady is familiar with, and that adds a level of comfort. He's excited to see the evolution of the offense, but also not getting too far away for what's been good for the Bills and what's been good for Josh Allen. So I think that's a good approach. I think you want Joe Brady to put his fingerprints on this, but you've also been a really good offense, and flipping it all upside down is not a smart idea. So keep some of those core staples of what's made you successful, but also Joe Brady, put your stamp on this thing. Do it your way, but you don't want to get too far deviated from what's made Josh Allen, an elite NFL starting quarterback over the last several seasons. All right, let's talk about a very clear theme from Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. They were both asked about explosive plays. I think Sal Capaccio did a good job of asking these questions and getting some similar answers. And I think this is probably the most meaningful piece of information from these press conferences in terms of gathering clues for what types of moves the Bills could make this offseason. So Sean McDermott asked about explosive plays. He said, "You've got to be able to either throw it down the field or throw it short and run down the field, whether it's via run after catch or a deep pass. Defenses are changing a bit too, with going to more split safety looks and more zone versus man. So it's forcing quarterbacks and offenses to be more patient at times. So the value of run after catch is important. If you're going to throw it short, you have to be able to take it from 5 to 15 or 50. I think that's an important piece as well." Let me go ahead right into Brandon Beane's comments here on explosive plays. He said, "We're always looking for speed and explosiveness at various positions. You want guys that can explode without the ball, but are also run after catch players. We get a lot of too high shells, and teams are going to make us go 9, 10, 11 plays to score, and you don't want to have to do that every single time to get points." I think that they have the right mentality. I think we can all look at the Bills' 2023 offense, and you can acknowledge that it was productive, but there was certainly the explosive plays that were missing, whether it was throws down the field or run after catch, although I think the run after catch was probably as good as we've seen it in a number of years for the Buffalo Bills this past season. But they need more of it, and they're exactly right. And I've talked a lot about this throughout the last year or so, couple of years on the podcast, where you're getting a lot of too high safety shells, and what those too high safeties are doing is they're splitting the field in half, making sure nothing gets behind them. And that makes it very difficult to throw the ball down the field and have good looks to do so. And so I think your counter to that is, well, if you're going to pull players and put them in deeper alignments, great. We have to be able to run the ball. We have to be able to throw it short and turn those plays into chunks. You need to be able to rip off longer runs. And you've seen the Bills shift from Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, who are good running backs, but they're not explosive, into, okay, here's James Cook, here's Nyheim Hines, here's Ty Johnson, who are explosive running backs, right? So you've seen a fundamental shift there. They want to get some more chunk plays out of the run game, with more explosive players, right? You have to be able to get explosive plays, not just throwing a deep ball, right? Like here's a bomb, here's a 9 route, go run in a straight line. Josh Allen's going to throw it deep. You got to be able to do it in other ways. And of course, that's one of it. I think the run after catch dynamic is still something that this offense can improve upon. I love what we saw from Khalil Shakir this past season. I love what we saw from Dalton Kincaid this past season. I think those are going to be important run after catch players, but how do you continue to add to that? And as we consider that and who the Bills could target in the draft, who the Bills can target in free agency, that explosive play element has to be there. They have to be able to create vertical separation to stress defenses down the field, but also can they do what Sean McDermott is saying and take a 5-yard pass and turning it into a 15-yard pass or a 50-yard pass. And what Brandon Beane's talking about is, look, defenses want to make the Bills stay patient and have to go 9, 10, 11 plays to score. That's hard. It's hard to do that. It's hard to execute in the NFL that many plays in a row successfully without there being a negative play, a penalty, something that puts you behind the sticks. You give up a sack, something like that. You know, you throw incomplete on 1st and 10. Oh, crap, it's 2nd and 10, right? Like, there's so many different ways for when you have to sustain drives for that many plays to score. There's too many things that can go wrong, and it just makes it a tough world to live in. Now, you got Josh Allen. He overcomes a lot of that, but this is important. Like, the Bills have to find more explosive plays to make it easier on offense. And so I was delighted to hear these comments, and they're not totally different from things that we've heard in the past from them, but I thought the directness from both of them, talking about too high shells, talking about zone coverage, talking about sustaining 9, 10, 11 plays, drives, the different ways to get explosive plays. It felt like when they were asked about it, it was something that they had been talking about behind closed doors, and the similarity in how they answered the question was very meaningful to me, and certainly helps me calibrate my hopes and expectations for how they add to this offense this offseason. The last thing I'll mention here, Sean McDermott was asked about, of course, the value of the combine and just what he's looking for in these meetings with the players. And I really like how he answered the question. He said, look, you're trying to learn from your successes. You look at players that you've picked and it's worked out, and what characteristics were true about them that allowed them to come in and make an impact. And he specifically mentioned Dalton Kincaid and Osiris Torrance as two guys that came in and made a very early impact in year one as rookies. And he said this, he said, it's a young man's game right now with the amount of rookies that are playing and playing impactful snaps across the league. We need our young players to come in and be ready to play. And these interviews help us to get to the bottom of who these players are. And Sean even went on to talk about, like, in the salary cap era, you know, you'd love for the switch to come on in year one, year two at the latest. And he said sometimes for some players it comes on in year 3, but in the salary cap era, you're not maximizing that rookie inexpensive contract to its fullest if it takes 3 years for a guy to really have it all come together. And I thought this was a good acknowledgement of something that I think maybe some fans have had some questions about with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott and young players and the roles that they fill. I think that's a narrative that is flipped upside down coming into or out of 2023 compared to where it was in 2022. A lot of people like upset that 2022 draft class didn't have more impact in 2022, but boy, oh boy, was it awesome in 2023 with Benford, Khalil Shakir, Terrell Bernard, James Cook, like huge additions in year 2. And then your rookies and Kincaid and Torrance and what they were able to do in year 1. Like, I think the narrative of the Bills and young players and getting production was a 1 year really silly conversation that is completely flipped upside down this year. And I thought that acknowledgement from Sean McDermott that, look, it's got to happen quicker if we're going to maximize these opportunities in the salary cap era. I think that shift has happened. 100% of the team need that moving forward. It's going to be a foundational piece of the Bills' ability to sustain their success and obviously get over the hump. So there you have it. Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane, both meeting with the media on Tuesday, Monday night for Sean McDermott. That's what I found to be interesting from their press availability. I hope you found it interesting for me to break it down. Our next conversation, we're getting right back to free agent targets. We're going to focus in on the defensive side of the football the rest of the week. So buckle up. I gave you all the offensive positions are done at this point. We're doing defense the rest of the week. So that's what you can expect on this podcast. Thanks for being here. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.